There are some activist types who I think push propaganda and outright lie, like recently with the Neil Gorsuch situation, where they just full-on lied about the situation, whether he would wear a mask or not, and even when everybody in the Supreme Court came out and said this did not happen, they still stood by their story. That's wrong. You see a lot of that. But more so what you see is people not thinking outside the box. And I'll give a couple examples of that. I like to listen to left-wing media just to see what they're saying. And I usually listen to the New York Times podcast, The Daily, on most days. And they'll actually do this thing where they'll provide really good data, very good research, and then just totally botch their interpretation of it. And I remember I lived in New York City when COVID first happened. We were losing 700, 800 people a day. They could not bury people fast enough. There were body trucks on the street outside of my apartment. It was terrifying. And a couple months after all this went down, the New York Times Daily podcast did this episode where they went in and they looked and they said, why was it that New York City had 700, 800 people dying a day, and they tended to be centralized in these public hospitals? Meanwhile, you had these overflow hospitals that we spent millions of dollars on that were sitting empty. So what went wrong? And what they found was a couple things. One, there were these really corrupt crony regulations in place from the city that said ambulance companies, when they were called, had to take people to an assigned hospital, even if it was overflowing, even if there was an empty hospital across the street. And then their regulations said not only that, but when an ambulance got you to that hospital, you had to be checked in there and then processed, and then another ambulance would have to come pick you up and take you to the other hospital in order for you to get across the street. Now, to me, I'm screaming, right? I'm like, this is a perfect case of how regulations get people killed. This is a perfect case of why you don't want the government running healthcare. Do you know what their analysis was? They said that we were greedy, that we didn't fund public hospitals well enough, that this was why we needed to give public hospitals more money. What?